Hello again to another Agricolor React, and today we will be watching all the crazy stuff Trump is going to do from Legal. Well, yeah, Trump won the election, so he's gonna be president again, so let's just watch. Let's just see what kind of... I wasn't really paying attention to the whole campaign, so I'm not sure what's going on. I made a reaction about his proposed tariffs and stuff, what that can do, but the rest of the stuff, I'm not entirely sure what's gonna happen and what he had in his campaign, so let's just watch and see. And it won't go. Hello.
This is gonna be so bad. Well, get ready for Trump's Project 2025 because Trump surrogates are already admitting that Project 2025 was the plan the whole time. But yeah, this is going to be terrible, and not in a politics as usual way. If you win the presidency, you get to issue your own executive orders and rescind the prior guys and sign legislation into law. If you're elected, you get to pull the levers that Congress has delegated to you. To the victor, go the spoils. But what we're about to see is changing the rules midstream. What we're about to see is pure dirty pool. This is gonna be bad, and I feel comfortable using that normative language because what we're about to see is not only someone who is unbound by laws, mores, norms, and tradition, but someone that controls all three branches of government. And this is a type of unmitigated control. It's a type we've never really seen in this country. And in particular, because a lot of this deals with and relies on the judiciary, it will take probably 40 years to undo what's about to happen. But because I'm a masochist, I compiled a list of all the crazy legal stuff that I expect in the first few years of the second Trump administration. Now, this will be an unusual video because I'm making some guesses here. Politics is not an exact science, and law is the byproduct of politics. So these are just my predictions, and we can check back in a year or two and see how we did. Frankly, I think I'm going to underestimate the amount of crazy stuff that's about to happen. Now, there's three categories of things that I expect. The first is things that Trump can do immediately without further approval, like executive orders. Then there's stuff where it's unclear if approval is needed, it's a legal gray area, or you can just force it through illegally, especially if you have a compliant judiciary. And then there's stuff that would definitely require further approval from something like Congress, things like passing legislation. But let's start with the executive. First of all, the guardrails are gone. There are not going to be any adults in the room. It appears that Trump has learned his lesson from hiring institutionalists the first time around and is just going to hire every toady and troll he possibly can. And as we'll discuss, there's a very good chance that he fires a lot of the nonpartisan career civil service. He would certainly fire Jack Smith immediately if Jack Smith is still there. And as we covered in one of the last videos, it looks like Jack Smith may not be around because of the interplay between the 1973 OLC memo and the fact that it's DOJ policy that the executive branch can't prosecute the president himself. And on that score, I'd probably expect pardons for the January 6ers and other reprobates.
Didn't even think about it. I didn't think about it. I wonder, will he gonna pardon all those people from the January 6th, 2021? Because, wow.
Issue pardons until the end of their term, but Trump is already a lame duck. And since some of those prosecutions are going on right now, you might expect the pardons sooner rather than later. It would also be super trolly and lib triggering, so that's another reason why I expect Trump to do it. Now, I don't really expect him to pardon himself, except maybe on the way out to pardon himself for everything that he does between 2025 and 2029. Mainly because he doesn't need to pardon himself for anything he did prior to taking office because he has escaped justice. All the federal prosecutions are dead because he was elected, and the state prosecutions are probably on hold, but are effectively dead because they can't prosecute while he's president either. Presumptively. I mean, we don't know how the Supreme Court will rule, but we definitely know how the Supreme Court would rule. You can expect a complete clown show of a cabinet. At this point, all the respectable people and institutionalists have learned their lesson and know that Trump has no loyalty, so they don't want anything to do with him, and Trump doesn't want anything to do with them. Now, we already know a few. Marco Rubio has been pegged for Secretary of State. Homeland Security and Chief Puppy Killer Kristi Noem. Tom Homan has been pegged as the border czar. He wrote the immigration section of Project 2025, by the way. And drink up, kids, because Matt Gaetz is gonna be AG. So expect a whole bunch more in Project 2025, folks, as well as appointments doled out as political rewards to reward people who were loyal to Trump. And oh my God, he's nominating Fox morning anchor Pete Hegseth to Secretary of Defense. This is definitely the bad place. And while Trump has a Senate majority to rubber stamp most of his appointments, he appears to be demanding that the Senate enter a recess so he can appoint everyone with a recess appointment without Senate confirmation at all. Which tells you something, that some of these people are going to be so unpalatable that even a Republican-controlled Senate would not consent to them. And as I said, expect a complete gutting of the administrative state, just firing any career civil servant who isn't out and out loyal to Trump and MAGA. Now, this is going to be a high priority for Trump because during his first term, his ambitions were thwarted by people who weren't blindingly loyal. And as our own Liz Dye explained, Project 2025 is not just a policy blueprint, it was also meant as a recruiting tool to help identify people who are all in on Trumpism. And the end goal is to get rid of all civil servants and replace them with right-wing ideologues. So on day one, expect Trump to reinstate his Schedule F, which he did at the end of his first term, which is a Trump executive order that purports to let him reclassify a ton of federal employees, as many as 50,000 of them, to be treated the same as political appointees so he can fire them. Generally, civil servants have some protections, but political appointees can be hired and fired at will by the president. This executive order basically removed all the protections and said that they were treated the same as political appointees. Trump first issued this executive order in October of 2020. Biden rescinded it, and then the Office of Personnel Management issued a rule that says the president cannot reclassify employees for arbitrary reasons. But Trump is obviously going to challenge that in court, or he could simply promulgate a new rule. Now, to do this, Trump would need to ignore the APA and the regulatory framework of the civil service protection, but Trump can try a ton of things, including arguing that he has broad authority to ignore the APA for national security reasons and emergency reasons. And if Trump just simply fires all those people and lets them battle it out in court, then the battle is won anyway. He either has to undo the Office of Personnel Management regulation through rulemaking, which would take some time, or he'll have to ignore the existing reg, which is legally impermissible, technically. Now, the norm for basically forever was to leave the career staff in place so the government could actually function from one administration to the other. And this would be a monumental shattering of norms. But this appears to be part of a larger plan to gut the administrative state to make it not work at all. Trump might just fire them all without bothering to replace them with ideologues, or require a loyalty oath from everyone. Now, departments are funded by Congress, but it's up to the executive to run them. And I really hope you don't rely on the government or interface with it, because there's a good chance that large swaths of the government simply won't work soon. And there's also been talk that security clearances would be given out by fiat without any background check or based on a paltry background check completed by a hand-picked private firm rather than the FBI. The subtext being that many folks would not be able to receive a security clearance through normal channels. Not to mention, this would also be an easy way to punish detractors by removing clearances or preventing them from getting a security clearance. And also expect Trump to remove any protections for whistleblowers, which he can simply do through executive order.
That's a lot. That's seriously a lot mess in my opinion. But well, we're gonna have to see, and we're gonna, I guess, survive. Well, I always say, well, I'm kind of lucky because I'm in Europe, you know, and it doesn't really, what Trump is gonna do in the White House doesn't really. No, people say that. I say that whatever happens in America on a governmental level, it have repercussions all around the world. So it's not going to just be nothing, and it's just, yeah. But it's just like firing and doing stuff like that is just kind of strange. But well, I don't know if it's strange. First of all, I can't understand how come, because as far as I know, America doesn't have the prisoners in America have no rights. Someone who was convicted of, yeah. So, but then on the other hand, he had like convictions, multiple convictions, criminal convictions, and he became president. This is just kind of mind-boggling. So yeah. Oh, another ad about maths again. What they want? They want me to learn more ads. Is it another minute there? So I'm just gonna watch it through, and I'm gonna cut here because I have nothing to add for now. And I'll see you in a second. Bye. Okay, so I'm back. That was long, and yeah. Okay, let's just go back. Oh, forgot about the sound again.
RFK Jr. is slated to be the head of the CDC, the FDA, and God only knows what else. Now, historically, the Supreme Court has sided with state authorities to mandate vaccines to protect public health, but that consensus was unsettled after COVID when some courts struck down vaccine mandates. Now, RFK Jr. said he will be given the authority to ban vaccines.
There's no vaccine that is, safe and effective.
And who knows here? The Food and Drug Administration has the primary responsibility for approving vaccines and pulling them from the market. It works in concert with the Center for Disease Control, and we don't know what role, if any, Trump is going to give Kennedy, but if given the authority, look for him to take over systems like the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which monitors adverse reactions to vaccines. RFK also has antidepressants and fluoridated water in his sights as well. And I'm sure despite the dubious legality of these efforts, This will be bolstered by the judiciary because, as we saw with the battle over abortion drugs, some judges are eager to get involved in making safety determinations themselves instead of relying on decades of research. Now, despite the advice of every economist on the planet and anyone who knows how tariffs work, Trump is all in on tariffs. And this is one area where Trump actually might have the ability to implement tariffs without any further approval. The Trade Expansion Act of 1962, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and the Trade Act of 1974 give the president authority to impose tariffs for national security reasons or in response to unfair trade practices. Trump used this discretion in 2018 to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports and on a range of Chinese goods. He cited national security reasons for slapping a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum. And will he do it again? Well, yeah, probably. Now, I would actually be surprised if Trump implemented a large tariff on all foreign-made goods, simply because tariffs are taxes on the goods imported from foreign countries, and the foreign countries won't be paying them. Those added costs are always passed on to the consumer. And we're already hearing from businesses who are preparing for the tariff era by buying extra products now to avoid paying tariffs next year. So when businesses and consumers actually figure out how tariffs work and complain about the astronomically high prices, you can probably expect some symbolic tariffs, but probably not the across-the-board tariffs and replacing of the entire American tax system that Trump has been arguing for.
Read more.
Didn't we just head out? Oh, wow. Yeah. So basically, I made the reaction about the tariffs some time ago, and the economists are presuming it's gonna cost about $700 on top of each household, I believe, I remember right. So yeah, probably not that great. It could be good for a short time, but long term, we don't know. We'll see. I mean, maybe Legal is right that there's gonna be some kind of like symbolic tariffs instead of just some big ones. Because now obviously I think the most talk is about tariffs and stuff like that, so yeah. And well, yeah, that's what's gonna happen. And so far it doesn't sound that great, really, for America. Back. Those were at least short, so they're doing short, long, short, long. Okay.
Now, I'm old enough to remember when Republicans wanted free trade, and honestly, I kind of want to see them go whole hog on tariffs because the inflationary effects would be so big and would happen so fast. It might destroy the economy, but the fire would burn really bright. Obviously, if you're going to destroy the federal government from the inside, you'd want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my law firm, the Eagle Team, can help. If you've gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you got one of those data breach letters saying your information might have been leaked, or dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. It's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can maximize your recovery and find out what your options are. So just click on the link in the description and call the phone number on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team. So you can click below. You can probably expect another budget-busting tax cut bill. Now, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 introduced several tax reductions for corporations and high earners. Many of those provisions are scheduled to expire at the end of 2025. So I would expect Congress to pass a law extending and expanding those tax cuts. Now, despite Trump's statements that he's going to appoint Elon Musk as some sort of budget czar who's going to be out looking for unnecessary regulation and unnecessary government spending, I don't expect this Trump administration to make any sizable dent in the debt or the deficit, because discretionary spending is a drop in the bucket compared to entitlements and defense spending, and I would be shocked if Trump or Musk reduced either, but there is some worry that certain tax measures would cause Social Security to run out of cash much sooner. And I don't expect them to go after Medicare or Social Security that much to the extent that they can, because those are overwhelmingly popular programs. However, it's pretty likely that we'll see the end of Obamacare and the ACA. Now, at the moment, Trump doesn't really have anything to replace it with. He has concepts of a plan.
If we come up with something, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it.
You still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan.
But you can't expect them to just try to break it and blow it up. So it's entirely possible that they could just repeal it and deal with the aftermath later. Republicans have tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act 100 times, and the last time they tried it during Trump's first term, they lost by 1 vote. Senator McCain's memorable thumbs down moment. So now would probably be a good time to get medical coverage if you have a pre-existing condition or your job does not offer health insurance to you. Maybe the most moderate version of this is what incoming Vice President J.D. Vance said, which is letting insurance companies put people with pre-existing health conditions in different risk pools. That would mean that insurance companies would be able to charge higher premiums to those with chronic conditions or pre-existing conditions. So at the very least, under a Trump ACA plan, expect people with pre-existing conditions to pay a lot more for medical insurance. Expect absolute grift for days. Now, one of the most brain-melting aspects of the first Trump era was watching Trump openly use his office for personal gain.
Constant attempts to sell you stuff. Who does that? Selling you gold sneakers and $100,000 watch and most recently a Trump Bible.
Now, there was a provision in the Constitution that was meant to prevent that. It was called the Emoluments Clause. See Article 1, Section 9, Paragraph 8. But courts basically read that out of existence, though those cases were dismissed on standing and jurisdictional grounds, not on the merits. So Trump used the Trump International Hotel in D.C. to take hundreds of payments from pardon seekers, job seekers, U.S. agencies like the Secret Service, foreign diplomats, and anyone else who wanted things from Trump. Public interest groups and members of Congress filed many lawsuits against Trump during this first term, but the courts ruled that no one really had standing to pursue the lawsuits, including members of Congress. But of course, right after Trump left office and the hotel was no longer of use to him, he sold that hotel. So yeah, now expect all kinds of shenanigans with the Trump Media Group and Truth Social. The Trump Media Group has been one of the most money-losing firms on the exchange, but because it's a publicly listed company, expect all kinds of shenanigans with people buying up the stock, and all kinds of shenanigans with people just engaging in all kinds of crazy contracts with this company that's basically worthless. I am also worried about all kinds of other grift. There are a bunch of pending lawsuits against the federal government by Trump's friends and by Trump himself. And not to mention, Trump is currently suing the DOJ for $100 million himself. And I do worry that Trump would just tell the government to settle for a huge sum in those suits. And expect more kleptocracy and patronage. Elon Musk, for example, the stock of Tesla has soared, probably on the realization that Musk is poised to turn his influence into yet more wealth. He's been hand in glove with Trump since the election. So for example, you can expect lots of roadblocks to cheap Chinese electric cars, which might undercut Tesla. And I need to apologize. I have in the past talked about how Musk tanked the value of Twitter. Buying Twitter might be the worst thing to ever happen to Elon Musk. But now it's clear that he used his influence, including through Twitter, to parlay that into a huge windfall. So it doesn't really matter what the book value of Twitter is as a private company. It was obviously just a tool for other gains. And on top of that, if you take certain government jobs, you don't have to pay capital gains taxes. So Musk could save billions in taxes if he realizes any gains on the stock.
Is he paying any taxes though? That's a question.
Investigations into Musk and his firms, like from the SEC, to be completely dead at this point. As with tariffs, I do expect mass deportations, but I expect it rather ineptly and probably incompletely. It would not surprise me to use the military and the National Guard to supplant ICE, but the thing is, it takes tens of thousands of dollars per deportation. It would be ruinously expensive, not to mention all of the human misery it would cause. Now, Trump has already pegged Thomas Homan to run the deportations. He was the architect of the family separation policy in the first administration, and he says the military will not be used, but that we'll need twice as many ICE agents, so who knows. And if it's anything on the scale that they've been suggesting, expect internment camps of sorts. Stephen Miller says the program will include denaturalization, which means probably the children of immigrants who are legal citizens of the United States would also be deported with their family. And there are rumblings from certain judges who have been eyeing a spot on the Supreme Court about losing birthright citizenship, which is currently enshrined in the 14th Amendment, but don't be so certain that future Supreme Courts agree. And there are rumors that they will end temporary protected status, which again are legal immigrants, and use that to deport legal immigrants like the much maligned Haitians in Ohio.
Sometimes the people call me on my business phone, and when I say, hello, Keket Bongo, can I help you? You say, you have cats, you have dogs in your menu?
And there are rumors that they'll get rid of a whole bunch of legal immigration programs like temporary protected status, again, legal immigrants, and use that to deport legal immigrants like the much maligned Haitians in Ohio. The one thing we know for certain is it's not going to include only criminal immigrants. A lot of legal immigrants are going to be caught up in this pogrom. But once we know more about what's actually going on, then we'll talk about the legality of it. But either way, it's going to be extremely expensive and full of human misery.
Tonight, in an Ingram Angle exclusive, we have word that yet another caravan is forming. One, of course, that our next guest says could be the biggest yet.
I do expect the politicization of the Department of Justice and probably the IRS against Trump's critics. As Eli Honig points out, when Bill Barr was the Attorney General, the Department of Justice was weaponized defensively. The things that were negative against Trump were quashed, like the investigation into the potential Egyptian bribe or the Mueller report. But largely the DOJ wasn't used offensively to create sham investigations. But now even Bill Barr is going to be gone, so expect it to be used offensively, and that's a really scary thought. Cleta Mitchell says they'll fire anyone in the voting section and civil rights division of the DOJ because they aren't MAGA, but a lot of this will depend on who's nominated to be the Attorney General and run the department, and we just don't know yet. That takes us to abortion, and there's a lot to cover here. The biggest question is whether Congress would pass a total abortion ban. State-level initiatives protecting abortion have been successful, so it's possible that Republicans will seek to avoid an outright ban. But that doesn't mean that the Supreme Court will. Right now, conservatives don't quite have enough justices to be able to invoke fetal personhood, we think. But Trump will almost surely get at least one justice and probably more, and the leading candidates for the court favor fetal personhood, which, if implemented, would mean no state would be allowed to have abortion at all, despite what the state constitutions say. But even short of that, you can probably expect mifepristone to not be able to be sold state to state. So far, the FDA has upheld the safety and efficacy of mifepristone. However, individual states retain authority to regulate medical practices within their jurisdiction, and as a result, some states have enacted bans that restrict or ban the use of the drug, despite its federal approval. And banning medical abortions remains a high priority for conservatives. That's one reason why it's likely we'll see the revival of the Comstock Act. The Comstock Act is a federal law enacted in 1873 that prohibits the mailing of, quote, obscene, lewd, or lascivious materials, and the act was originally aimed at restricting the distribution of pornography, contraceptive devices, and information about abortion through the mail. Historically, it had been
yeah, the abortion thing, when the Supreme Court overruled the Roe versus whatever from 70s, that was a shock to me. But well, that's what happens when you have conservative judges, isn't it? I don't know how you're supposed to. You can't really do a perfect thing, because obviously some people were happy about it, some people are not happy about it, and I'm not like pro-abortion fully, because I don't think abortion should be. Am I not? No, it's kind of hard not to kind of think for me. So what I think, because I think women should have a choice, but women shouldn't be treating abortion as a like contraceptive. Just use contraceptive to be safe and not get pregnant. And if you have an accident and you don't, you know, if you weren't planning but you were trying to be careful, then yeah, or I don't know. It's all depending on the situation of the woman as well, I think. So it's not so easy to make a decision, in my opinion, about abortion in the first place. So, we'll see. We'll see how it goes, because it's a hard thing to do.
rendered a nullity by the Supreme Court, but the
There you go.
law is still on the books. So in the first instance, expect it to be used to ban medical abortions, but then expect it to be taken a step further and used to ban anything related to abortions. But let's turn to the judiciary, because so much of what Trump plans to do relies on a pliant judicial system. If you thought the courts couldn't get any worse than they are, I have some really bad news, because Trump nominated very inexperienced lawyers to federal courts during his first term, sometimes even when the ABA said that they were completely unqualified. And you can expect way more of this during his second term. And expect a ton of them to be 40 years old or younger, because federal judges get life tenure, and if you're appointed young, then you can do a lot of damage for decades. The first time around, Trump nominated almost as many judges in his first term as Obama did in his 2 terms, so expect that to be supercharged. And since Republicans took back the Senate, they will absolutely rubber stamp all the federal judges that he nominates. So expect lots of completely unqualified judges. The only qualification is fealty to Trump and the Federalist Society. Now, part of the problem here is that conservatives have been complaining about so-called judicial activism for decades. But what we're already seeing from some Trump judges and some circuit courts of appeals that are dominated by Trump judges is so far beyond judicial activism. It goes into pure partisanship and complete hackery. And I think it's important to distinguish between conservative judges and Trumpist judges. These Trumpist judges seem to have loyalty to the man rather than crudely articulated principles. They seem to start with an outcome and then work backwards, and sometimes they don't even work backwards. And that's also led to some real shenanigans in terms of judge shopping. For example, if you file in a district that only has one federal judge, you will get that one federal judge in some of these circuits. That's why you're hearing so much from these crazy judges like Reed O'Connor, Matthew Kacsmaryk. So this is going to be a huge problem going forward, with people cherry picking the judge they want in the district that they want. Then that appeal goes up to the Circuit Court of Appeals that they want, and then that goes up to a very favorable Supreme Court. Oh, and now that Republicans control the federal government, you won't hear anything more about states' rights. But speaking of the Supreme Court, public approval of the Supreme Court is at an all-time low for very good reasons. Now, the Republicans already control the Supreme Court 6-3, but if you think it can't get any worse, you're probably wrong. What's likely to happen is that Alito and Thomas will retire. Not to mention replacing any of the liberal justices with someone as radical as Thomas if a seat comes up. Oops, all Thomases. This is the kind of court that would be eager to establish fetal personhood, rooted of course in the Constitution, if the Republicans don't have the stones to pass a law. Now, recently a lot of the Supreme Court's jurisprudence has been limiting what the federal government could do, finding that the Commerce Clause of the Constitution is more circumspect than what it has been historically over the last 100 years or so. I expect that jurisprudence to probably go away, except insofar as the federal government does anything progressive. For the law nerds, this is a throwback to the Lochner era, except this is a one-way street version of the Lochner era. I expect anything that the Republicans want to do will be firmly rooted in the traditions of the Constitution, but anything progressive will be interpreted as not relating to interstate commerce. And that takes us to religion. You can probably expect the court to continue to carve out huge religious exemptions for most things related to the Constitution or the federal government. And you can also expect the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to probably be basically stricken. That's been eroding over time, but you can expect further entwining of government in religion in the sense that the government is probably going to be funding religion in the near future. And then let's talk about LGBT rights. Trump's proposals are to restrict as many rights as he possibly can. He's pledged to eliminate federal policies to prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. He plans to revoke Title IX protections that allow transgender students to use facilities. Trump intends to prohibit federal funding for hospitals and healthcare providers that offer gender-affirming care. And Trump wants to reinstate bans on transgender individuals serving openly in the military. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted to roll back protections from gay people serving in the military as well. And expect the Supreme Court to roll back all jurisprudence related to the right to privacy. It started with overruling Roe, but I fully expect Obergefell to be next on the chopping block. That means no more same-sex marriages. But this time around, I expect they would find something in the Constitution that would forbid states from engaging in it as well. Now, the analogy that I think is right on the money is from poli-sci professor and Niskanen Center fellow Jacob Levy, and it relates to 1876. I really hope he's wrong about this, but he writes, "I keep coming back to 1876 as the analogy. Not the end of competitive elections or the establishment of a nationwide one-party state, but a catastrophic blow to constitutional government from which it took 90 years to sort of recover. It's not an election to end all elections, but it's also not an election we just recover from by the other side winning power back eventually. Up until now, it's been 8 years of trying to protect some idea of the underlying democratic constitutional order from Trump. After this, I think the actual underlying order has changed. To take one example, the peaceful contestation of elections and peaceful transfer of power is not a default anymore. For Trump to face no legal consequences for January 6th and to subsequently return to power and presumably to subsequently pardon a lot of people breaks that equilibrium. In 2020, a lot of people, the Brad Raffenspergers of the world, but also thousands of poll workers and local elections board and the like, believe themselves and could rely on others believing in the sanctity of those rules and norms. I don't see how that's possible for the foreseeable future. The attack on and politicization of the civil service is another case of deep institutional rot. Schedule F was only in place for a few months last time, and Biden ending it allowed the habits and norms to rebound. The damage that will be done by reintroducing Schedule F in week 1 is different. The idea that governing without financial conflicts of interest, separating institutional authority from family and personal connections, norms that people thought were enforceable and fundamental until Trump spent his first term showing that they could just be ignored. Now, I really, honestly hope he's wrong about that, but maybe it's time we all start reading up on our post-Reconstruction history and the deconstruction of the constitutional order that followed. So maybe we should all just lay low and keep a minimal online profile, which we can do with today's sponsor, Incogni. Because whether it's the Trump administration looking for the disloyal or online data brokers, you don't want any unnecessary online data out there. And Incogni removes your personal data from online data brokers by reaching out directly and forcing them to take your personal info down. If these data brokers fight back, Incogni will take care of that too, because Incogni fights back. And in fact, these data brokers are the reason why in the US you can search your name and find a bunch of websites that will give anyone your home address, phone number, and extensive history. It's shocking just how easy it is to find all of this information. It also might be why you're getting so many spam calls lately, or even how someone might steal your identity. But Incogni is a great way to fight back. I've used it to increase my online privacy and cut down on those annoying scam calls and emails that used to flood my voicemail and inbox. Now, I've been using Incogni for years, and in that time you can see I've been on hundreds of lists, some of which had a high sensitivity score, meaning the broker had tons of data on me. Luckily, Incogni has completed hundreds of takedowns for me over the years, and is processing dozens of others. And if I were to try this myself, it would take hundreds of hours. So thank you to Incogni for saving me hundreds of hours and adding me to over 40 suppression lists. And Incogni will continue to conduct ongoing removals, because even if the broker removes your data once, they can collect it again. And Incogni makes sure that your personal information stays off the market for good. So if online privacy is important to you, give Incogni a try. So if you click on the link that's on screen or down below, you can try Incogni risk-free for 30 days, get a full refund if you're not into it. But if you are, you can use the code LegalEagle for an exclusive 60% off discount. So to get an exclusive 60% off discount, just click on the link that's on screen right now or down in the description and use the code LegalEagle. And after that, click on this link over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.
Okay, so yeah, I was kind of talking over it, so it's gonna be interesting 4 years now. because of Trump come back. So it will be interesting. We're definitely gonna hear more about Trump and what's going on in America. I remember that in his first presidential tour, we pretty much heard about him every day. We just listened to the radio in the morning when we were getting ready before work, but pretty much you heard about Trump every day. And then when Biden took over, we didn't really hear much because obviously he wasn't so crazy. So yeah. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. We're definitely gonna survive, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.